I'll learn to say it after we find this son of a bitch. It was 3 days before we got anywhere even close to some forward movement. No Tally, no Hennessy, no Voida. And then the worst happened. On Friday morning, for the third time that month, I got an early call from Sampson about a dead body. Another junkie had been beaten to death, with more of the same numbers gibberish carved into his forehead and across his back. But one thing was different this time, and it changed everything. They found Stanislav's shopping cart next to the body, Sampson told me. At least I'm pretty sure it's his. Hard to tell one from another, you know. His voice was hoarse. I wasn't sure how much sleep he'd gotten since Voida had disappeared. This poor kid doesn't look like he was much more than 18, Alex. Sampson, are you going to be okay? I asked. You don't sound like yourself. I sure hope so. This isn't your fault, John. You know that, right? He still wasn't ready to answer that one. All he said was, you don't have to come down here. I'm coming, I said. Of course I am. The scene at Farragut Square was depressingly familiar when I got there. I'm never sure which is worse, the shock of something I've never seen before, or the weight of seeing it one too many times. The cart's definitely his, Sampson told me. We just found this. He held up an evidence bag with my own smudged business card inside. It felt like a hard kick to the head. What a mess this was. There's also visible blood splatter on the frame and a sawed-off sledgehammer on the bottom rack, presumably our murder weapon. I've been thinking about this, I said. There's a long underpass right by Lindholm. Homeless people sleep there all the time. That may be where he's hunting for his victims. Maybe so, John said, but then why cart them all the way over here? I don't get this at all. Why K Street? Not counting Kyle Craig's fake-out with Anjali Patel, all 3 victims in this case had been left somewhere along K, each one near the intersection of a prime-numbered street, 23rd, 13th, and now 17th. With 2 incidents, it had been harder to see, but with 3, the pattern popped right out. I wondered if the letter K represented something more specific in mathematics, but I wasn't sure. And moreover, the man's insane, Sampson. That's the one constant. We may not get very far looking for motive here. Or for him, John said, and thumbed over at the cart. Whatever made him leave his stuff behind, something's changed, Alex. I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling we may never see this guy again. I think he's history. I'm so used to my own phone going off at all hours that I was reaching for the nightstand before I realized it was Bree's cell ringing, not mine. The clock by the bed said 4:21. Oh, good God almighty, what now? This is Stone, I heard her in the dark. Who's this? Right away, she sat up. When she turned on the light beside the bed, the phone was pressed against her chest, and she whispered so low that she practically mouthed the next words to me. It's Kyle Craig. Now I was up too. When I took the phone, I could hear Kyle still talking on the other end of the line.
Bree, sweetheart, are you there?
If he'd been in front of me, I honestly believe I could have killed him without thinking twice. But I kept my head as best I could. I grabbed control of my emotions. Kyle, it's Alex. Don't ever call this number again, I said, and hung up. Bree's jaw literally dropped. What was that? She said. Why did you do that? My line in the sand. It doesn't do me any good to let him keep setting the rules. Do you think he'll call back? Well, if he doesn't, we'll both get a little more sleep, I said. Something had changed in me. I wasn't going to keep playing this game forever. I couldn't. And in any case, my own cell phone rang a few seconds later. What? I answered.
Bree never answered my question about how the wedding plans were coming along. I figured that was more her department than yours.
No. You wanted to make yourself seem more threatening. He laughed, almost congenially.
Did it work?
I'm hanging up, Kyle.
Wait, there is something else. It's important, or I wouldn't be calling so early.
I didn't ask what it was. In fact, I was about to hang up anyway when he went on.
I got you an engagement present. Of sorts. Since I'm allowing you to get married and all, a little something to free up your schedule so you can focus on that pretty little bride-to-be.
Now my heart sank. I had to know. Kyle, what have you done?
Well, if I told you, that would spoil the surprise, wouldn't it? 29th and K, northeast corner. And you might want to hurry.
By sunrise, we had a full tactical team in place at the corner of 29th and K. There was very little I'd put past Kyle, and while it could be a mistake to show up when and where he specified, I couldn't just ignore the phone call. So we took precautions, as much as we possibly could. The location was at the edge of Rock Creek Park, with the Whitehurst Freeway running overhead. We put officers with MP5s on the overpass, and a barrier of armored SWAT vans hugging the corner to block as many sightlines as possible. Our nerve center was a coffee shop on K, where the SWAT unit commander, Tom Ogilvy, could stay in radio contact with his team. Sampson and I listened in on headsets. EMS was on standby, with patrol units barring the street a block away in each direction. All personnel were outfitted with Kevlar and helmets. And maybe it was all for nothing. Was Kyle actually watching? Was he armed? Ready with something up his sleeve? Or maybe none of the above? I think that's exactly what he wanted me to wrestle with now. In any case, it didn't take long for the entry team to find something. Less than 5 minutes after they'd snaked into the park from 29th, their lead man radioed over. "We got a body here," he said. "White male, middle-aged, looks like it could be a homeless guy." "Proceed with caution," Ogilvy radioed back. "We'd already briefed everyone about the possibilities here. I want a full visual check around that body before anyone touches it. B-team, I need you on high alert." 3 more minutes of silence ticked by until the all-clear came back, such as it was. When I reached for the coffee shop door, Sampson grabbed my arm. "Let me do this one, Alex. If Kyle's here, it could be you he's waiting for." "No way," I told him. "Besides, if Kyle ever comes for me, it's going to be face-to-face, not from a distance." "Oh, because you know everything there is to know about that maniac," he said. "I know that much," I said, and headed outside. Even before we got close to the body in the park, I recognized Stanislav Voida's filthy barn coat. He'd been left on his side, shoved under a clump of bushes, just like his own victims before him. There was no carving this time. The only visible injury was a single puncture wound to the throat, similar to the one we'd seen on Anjali Patel. The skin on his neck was a solid stain of dried blood, and it continued down under his shirt. That meant he'd most likely been sitting up when he was stabbed, probably when he died, too. We'd already run prints on the shopping cart and sledgehammer from Farragut Square. There was no doubt anymore that Voida was our numbers killer. Still, whatever he'd done when he was alive, I felt a wave of pity for him now. "What's this?" Sampson pointed at something in Voida's hand. I pulled on some gloves and knelt down to take whatever it was from between the clenched fingers. It was a small greeting card, the kind you usually send with flowers. This one had a picture of a wedding cake on the front, with an African-American bride and groom at the top. "It's my engagement present," I said. I felt a little sick to my stomach. When I opened the card, I instantly recognized the precise block letters of Kyle's handwriting.
To Alex. You're welcome. KC. After 5 days of lying low with Mitch in the West Virginia woods, Denny got the call he'd been waiting for. Then it was another several days for reconnaissance in D.C. before they were good to go. It wouldn't be much longer now, just a little while, and he'd be a free man. A very rich free man. The door banged open behind him as they came out onto the roof of the National Building Museum. He turned around and Mitch held up a hand. "My bad," he said. "Just shut the damn thing and come on," Denny said, harsher than he meant to. It wasn't as if the noise really mattered. The museum was closed for the night, and the nearest threat risk was the 20-something mope sitting downstairs at a ground-floor security desk watching horror movies on his laptop. It was more about having spent one too many nights sleeping elbow to elbow in the old Subaru with Mitch, living off of canned food and listening to him yammer on about the mission. He shook it off and walked over to the southwest corner of the roof to look out. Traffic on F Street was light for a Friday. There was a slight breeze with the promise of showers for later, but so far everything was quiet. The first limos would start pulling up in front of Sidney Harmon Hall, or just the Harmon to the locals, in about 15 to 20 minutes. Mitch came along and waited silently behind Denny as he unrolled the canvas tarp. Then Mitch set out his gear and started assembling the M110.
"You mad at me or something, Denny?" he said finally. "We got a problem?"
"No, man," Denny said right away. There was no sense in making him uptight tonight, especially not tonight. "You're doing great. I'm just ready to get this one done, you know? A little overeager. My bad." That seemed to satisfy him. Mitch nodded once and went right back to business. He flipped down the bipod, set the rifle on the ledge, and put his eye up to the scope. Once he'd adjusted the buttstock against his cheek, he could start dialing in.
"We're working in a range tonight,"
Denny said, keeping his tone nice and easy now.
"Cars are going to be stopping all up and down the block."
Mitch swept left and right a few times, getting a feel for the sidewalk in front of the theater.
"You said these crumb bums are a couple of judges?"
"That's right," Denny said.
"Two of the most powerful fuckers in the country." "What do they do?"
"You know what an activist judge is?"
"Not really. What's that?"
"Well, let's just say that the good old US of A is better off without 'em," Denny said.
"I'll spot 'em, and you drop 'em, Mitch. But it's going to be fast. You got to be ready, okay? 1, 2, then we're out of here."
Mitch held his position like always, but the corners of his mouth turned up just a hair. It was the closest thing to a cocky little smile Denny had seen on him in a while.
"Don't worry, Denny," he said. "I won't miss."
By 7:30, F Street was one long line of black cars. The event tonight was Will on the Hill, an annual fundraiser for arts education in D.C. 24 Capitol Hill movers and shakers were all set to perform an inside baseball version of Will Shakespeare's Twelfth Night for an audience of more of the same. Congressmen, senators, Hill staffers, and half of K Street probably. Denny watched the road through his sighting scope.
"No shortage of foxes in the henhouse tonight, am I right?" "I guess," Mitch said, still eyeing over the crowd. "I thought this was going to be a bunch of famous people. I don't recognize none of them down there."
"Yeah, well, you're kind of famous now, too. Nobody knows what you look like," Denny said. Mitch smiled.
"Point."
Rahm Emanuel and his wife were just arriving. The House Minority Leader and Senate President pro tempore had shown up together a minute ago, grabbing a much-needed photo op in the middle of a contentious legislative session. Each one got out of his car and crossed the red brick sidewalk, maybe 6 paces, until he was under the cantilevered glass wall that hung over the theater's main entrance. This was definitely going to be tight when it happened. Finally, at 10 minutes to 8, Denny spotted who he was looking for. A short Mercedes limo stopped at the curb. The driver got out and came around to open the door, and the Honorable Cornelius Summers stepped into view.
"Here we go, Mitch. 10 o'clock, long blue dress, getting out of the Mercedes."
Right behind her, Justice George Ponte stood up. They stopped long enough to wave self-consciously at the press and the gawkers gathered behind police lines on the sidewalk. Even from a distance, Denny noticed that these two looked out of their element.
"Number 2's in the tux with the gray hair."
Mitch had already adjusted his stance.
"I'm there. Shooter ready?"
Summers took Ponte's arm, and they turned to go inside, just a few steps away now.
"Ready,"
Mitch said.
"Send it."
The M110 gave off a familiar sharp pop as the bullet passed through the suppressor 3,000 feet per second. In virtually the same moment, Cornelius Summers collapsed to the ground with a small red blossom just above her left ear. Justice Ponte stumbled as she came off his arm and the second shot missed. A glass door about 10 feet from the man's head shattered into a million pieces.
Again, Denny said. Now.